Step right up.
Literally Canadian.
Literally. I didn't shoot down that many.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Pete, and Nichols Republican Men's Club. I appreciate the opportunity to come and to speak today and let you know a little bit about who I am. I'm Dan Severson, Navy Top Gun fighter pilot. I had the blessing of living a childhood dream, and that was to go into the Navy and fly Navy fighter aircraft. In fact, I flew off the USS Midway was my first assignment, where I got nuclear weapons qualified, which means you get to go drop a nuclear weapon, which was kind of a big deal, but it was one of those things that really kind of puts into context what the job is all about. We lost some good sailors on every cruise. It's a dangerous job, and it was one of those things that the men and women who serve in our country do because they love our country. From there, I made the transition to the F-18 Hornet, and I became officer in charge of an F-18 squadron, went through Top Gun training, and we became the adversary squadron for the fleet. From there, I got orders to Washington, D.C. I spent 3 years in Washington, D.C., doing plans and policy, briefing Chief of Naval Operations and the Secretary of the Navy on those issues. And from there, ended up taking orders to Weapons China Lake, Weapons Naval Test Squadron, China Lake. And in that, I received a top secret compartmentalized, because we were doing cutting edge technology on what the military has for the future, and doing the test and evaluation on those. One of the interesting things I ran into, particularly there, was a whole issue that we're dealing with even now, is the China threat. And the things that were taking place there, we would get regular briefings on how China was trying to intrude, how they were trying to interdict and penetrate our intellectual property.
20 seconds.
Thank you. From there, I went back to Minnesota, where our family was at, and got elected in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I spent 8 years in the Minnesota House, 4 in the majority, 4 in the minority, 2 as the minority, where we held back $3.2 billion in tax increases. Thank you, Dan Severson. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Even as you said that, that didn't sound good. Good morning, everybody. My name is Byron Donalds. First of all, it's a pleasure to be with all of you again after such a long time, so I'm glad you could make it out this morning. My name is Byron Donalds. I currently serve in the Florida House of Representatives here in Naples, and also I represent Hendry County. I've lived here for 17 years, and some of you in this room I've known for just about a decade in Southwest Florida. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I'm the product of a single-parent household. I'm a graduate of Florida State University, and I'm married to Erica Donalds, who's more famous than I am in a lot of rooms, and we have 3 children. I got into politics through the Tea Party movement. You know, back in 2008, I was concerned about deficits and debts. I was concerned about the future of the country, and I was concerned about Washington living past their constitutional powers. But it started with our economy. That's why I decided to actually learn politics, actually learn political philosophy, to actually read the writings of John Locke and Montesquieu, to have an appreciation for the foundation and the pillars of the greatest nation man has ever known. And so when I got into politics, I couldn't just read about it, I had to get engaged. So I joined the Tea Party movement. And that's where I spent most of my time on the ground, right here in Southwest Florida. 4 years ago, I was elected to the Florida legislature, and I've served with distinction there, being one of the most conservative members of our legislature in our great state of Florida. And now I'm asking for your vote to run for Congress. Let me be clear, we are in very, very difficult times in our nation. We are more divided than we probably ever have been. But what we need, 20 seconds?
20 seconds.
Got it. So what we need, frankly, are members who, number one, are strong, proven conservatives, no matter what may happen in the legislative body, but also have an ability to take our mission, our principles to all voters, so we can expand our party, re-elect our presidents, and actually continue the greatest experiment man has ever known. My name is Byron Donalds. I am asking for your vote to represent you in Congress. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Cobalt. I'll just start from the beginning. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, a suburb of Pittsburgh, with blue-collar beliefs, hard work, roll up your sleeves, go to work, put a 15, 14-hour day in, and do it all again the next morning. Graduated high school in 1984. Well, if you know the history of Pittsburgh, 1984, our steel mills were dying. A lot of steel was being sold from Japan. and it was decimating our economy at the time. So I did the next best thing. I went in the United States Army as an 18-year-old male, and I followed the footsteps of all the males ahead of me that served in every war since World War II. My grandfather, my other grandfather, my uncles, my father. And after that, I came back to Pittsburgh, and I went to school to study criminal justice. And I found my following. I went into law enforcement. I took my first job was the federal government. I worked in Washington, D.C. with the United States Capitol Police. And I made it to the rank of special agent on the Dignity Protection Team. And on September 11th, that morning, I was actually at the Navy Anacostia Navy Station, which sits right across the river from the Pentagon. And that's when we saw the horrific act of terrorism that killed over 4,000 of our Americans on our soil that morning. As I was leaving the Pentagon, because I had summons back to the Capitol, the Pentagon got struck by an airplane. The very place I was leaving just got struck. As I was heading to the Capitol, we started an evacuation plan to get our leadership out. And as I was standing in the Capitol looking out over the west front, that's when I heard a plane went down in Pennsylvania, in Shanksville. And I found out later that plane was coming to the Capitol, the very place I was standing and looking out the window. For some reason, I was spared that day. And I went on in law enforcement until 2003. I came here and served in Carter County Sheriff's Department. I served the people of Southwest Florida. And I've served that with distinguished and with honor and integrity. I want to take that to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is broken. The hatred for our president has destroyed our country. It's destroying everything we know, and we cannot leave this country in this condition for our children and their children. This cannot happen. We have to have someone of integrity who will carry your message to Washington without any being swayed in any way, and that's me, because I have the discipline. Dan Kowal for Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you for your hospitality, all of you, this morning. I am Mayor Randy Henderson, long-serving mayor of Fort Myers, the only mayor in its 140-year history to be elected 3 consecutive terms after serving 9 years on its council. And I believe that is my report card. All that has been talked about and that will be talked about on this stage this morning, I have lived and experienced in the leadership that I've been able to provide in the city of Fort Myers. There's a card that will give you some personal information about me, but I will start with this. I am a husband of 41 years this year. My wife, Virginia, who was born in Lee Memorial Hospital. We have raised 3 children who are adult leaders today in business and elsewhere. I am your mayor, and I am the conservative mayor that will lead this charge for this congressional seat. My conservatism is reflected in the leadership that I have demonstrated. I don't have to share it with you. I've used the same conservative principles as a conservative to lead our city's renaissance. Balanced budget, 20 consecutive years, $250 million budget this year, $402 million general fund capital improvement budget. We've created jobs. We've inspired $1.2 billion in private investing in our core of our city, which is everybody's living room. It's free for you to visit if you will. Ladies and gentlemen, I am the conservative who will hit the ground running day one for our Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, because I have lived it and done it. I have restored our police department. There's a long story behind that. Today is the day to separate. I'm the experienced one that's demonstrated the ability to do this. Thank you all very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. William Bigglestaller. Thank you all for coming out this morning to meet us candidates. My decision to run for Congress comes after 25 years of living, working, and serving in our district right here. I, as a, as a caring physician, business leader, father, and philanthropist, and as an example of the American dream. I'm asking for your vote to represent our shared values as an all-American single dad who started at the very bottom with nothing and worked hard to achieve the American dream, who fought hard to raise his 3 small children while studying medicine and working every job from flipping pancakes to pouring concrete, who arrived in Southwest Florida 25 years ago, crippled with debt, opened a tiny practice, took out loans, paid off debts, and achieved prosperity through hard work and not through government handouts, who as the father of a highly decorated combat Marine understands the seriousness of sending our brave American soldiers into harm's way. That's the kind of person I would want to represent me in Congress. I'm not running for Congress for a taxpayer-paid promotion, or because I termed out in the State House, or because this political seat would be the next bullet point on my resume. I'm running as an accomplished physician and surgeon who studied for 15 years in college, medical school, residency, and specialty care, and treated tens of thousands of patients, and I'm representing you in Congress. I'm asking for your vote on August 18th. Visit us online at drfigforcongress.com, and thank you for coming out this morning.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. My name is Christy McLaughlin. You can visit me at christyforcongress.com. My personal contact information is available there if you have any questions or if you want to reach me. We have to ask ourselves, and me in particular, since I am a lifelong Southwest Florida native and resident, how is it that we elect a conservative who says that they are going to vote for Joe Biden, a man who on Air Force Two allowed his son to make deals with China? How is it that right now the culture in our nation is to knee-jerk to allow infringement on our Second Amendment rights when a criminal uses guns for violence? How is it that we allow protesters and rioters to burn our churches, but we don't allow people to peaceably assemble at our churches in the time of quarantine? I'm here because as a lifelong Southwest Florida resident, I want to protect our rights, and we've had a history of allowing our rights to be walked all over. Now, I am the youngest person in the nation running for Congress at this time. And I can speak to these young conservatives here, congratulations to both of you in your journeys in college, that we don't get involved in politics. It's not about being in politics. It's about representing America and protecting our country, especially in a time like this. It's 2020 and we are standing on the ledge of socialism. And we are constantly, I can speak to us, and I'm sure everyone here is constantly being attacked by social justice warriors who are trampling over our rights, who are setting autonomous zones. 20 seconds?
You're right.
We're setting up autonomous zones that walk all over our Constitution. I'm a lawyer who studied the Constitution in law school. I proudly represent this area, and it is my pride and joy and so humbling to represent Southwest Florida in a time where we need strength and we need a steel jaw in Congress who's going to fight for our rights. My name is Christy McLaughlin. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Casey Asgar. It's nice to see all of you come out, and thank you, Jim, and to the club for doing this. My story goes, my folks came to this wonderful country when I was a little boy. They escaped Christian religious persecution. I grew up in a very patriotic home, strong Christian home, in a small town with blue-collar values, hard work ethic, and to give back. When I was a young man, I felt the call of duty, and I joined the U.S. Marines. I went on to start my business. I started a family, and my wife and I are proud parents and were blessed with 6 children. I went to school. I started my first business from nothing, grew that into a national enterprise, and I employed thousands of men and women nationwide. I'm a fighter, I'm a disruptor. I've been down here in Southwest Florida for almost 18 years. I came down with Tom Monahan when he decided to bring Ave Maria Law School down here in Ave Maria University. I sat on the board of Legatus, which is Catholic business presidents and CEOs. I sit on large business communities like YPO. I know how to create jobs. I know how to build business. I know industry. I know commerce, logistics. I've had a company here in Florida that was one of the largest transport companies in the state. Supply chain, those are the things that I do. I know economics. I know how to create jobs. I know how to build. That's what we need. We need fighters alongside President Trump in Congress to represent you. Because I've lived the American dream, I'll fight for the American dream, because America's worth fighting for me. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you in person. Thank you for coming out early on a Friday to brave the freedom and come out and say hello to everybody. I appreciate it very much. My name is Dane Eagle. I am the Republican Majority Leader in the Florida House of Representatives. I'm born and raised in Southwest Florida. I look forward to welcoming my son here in the next 10 days, who will also be born and raised in Southwest Florida. I went to Bishop Earl High School. I did a year at Florida Gulf Coast University before I got my economics degree from the University of Florida. I ran for office in 2012 to represent our community because we were coming out of the Great Recession. And I'd seen the rug pulled out of this wonderful community, and the economy hit us worse than pretty much anywhere else in the country. I went to Tallahassee and I fought for economic stability because that's the thing that matters to me most. I'm born and raised in a business-minded family. I'm a commercial real estate broker by trade. So we cut taxes since my tenure in the past 8 years by $10 billion. We've cut our debt by $8 billion. We have $4 billion in reserves. I've stood shoulder to shoulder with Governor DeSantis as House Majority Leader to make sure that we ban sanctuary cities once and for all. We passed E-Verify, we've cleaned our water, we've protected our unborn, our veterans, and all of our citizens. And yes, I'm term limited. And I look forward to going home to welcome my son and spend time with my wife and actually make some money in the commercial real estate business where I serve. But I noticed that we are going to be electing our 5th congressperson for Southwest Florida since 2012. And I could sit on the sidelines and watch that happen without knowing that we can have the ability to send someone there who's actually going to work for us and say what they say they're going to do. To be consistent conservatives and represent exactly what they campaigned upon. And not only that, but actually to serve us for some time. I support term limits, I fought for term limits, and I think they are a wonderful thing that all people should abide by. But this 2 to 4 year terms is not serving us well, and CD19 has become the laughingstock of the RNC. We need to send someone there who can navigate the legislative process, who can stand with President Trump to make sure that we are delivering on consistent conservative leadership for CD19, and I'm the candidate who can offer that. I look forward to discussing these viewpoints and these issues more thoroughly with you this morning. You can learn more at daneeagle.com. I'm asking for your vote, and thank you very much for being here this morning.
Okay, we're going to reverse the order, go back, take 2 cards so they know what the order is. But I want to ask them to speak, to address for 1 minute, the water quality issues. It's an impossible task. But we're blessed with an embarrassment of riches up here. I'd like everybody to give them a big hand for their introduction. I've had the pleasure to meet and speak to each and every one of them, and I tell you again, we have an embarrassment of riches. Thinking back to congressional candidates where I came from. With that, I'd like you to speak to the water quality issues with respect to Lake Okeechobee, the Caloosahatchee, the Red Tide. If you're elected, what is your priority with respect to those issues?
Great question, one that's been plaguing our district now for decades here in Southwest Florida. I'm born and raised here. In my 37 years, 2018 was the worst summer I have ever seen when it comes to our water quality issues. Red tide, blue-green algae, you name it. What we need to do is once and for all finish the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan. It was signed into law 20 years ago and it has not been completed. However, we have done more in the last decade than we have in the past 2 combined to get things done. In Tallahassee in 2016, we passed the Legacy Florida Act, which would ensure that $200 million per year for the next 20 years goes to the problem. We passed the Southern Reservoir in 2017, and in 2019 and 2020, as House Majority Leader, I fought with Governor DeSantis to make sure that we got $1.3 billion towards these projects to finish the dike, the reservoir south, east, west, and north of the lake, to raise Tamiami Trail, to have blue-green algae mitigation, red tide research, you name it. Now that's supposed to be a 50-50 cost share with our federal government. 1.3 billion is what we got in the last 2 years out of Florida. We got 500 million out of Washington. And that's more than they've done in forever. So we got to give great credit, and I do give credit to Francis Rooney for that, at least. He worked hard with Don. We got to get money done. Thanks.
Okay, number 7.
So this is a personal issue for me. I'm not only financially vested in Southwest Florida, but I'm personally vested with 6 young children. My older kids have stated to me that when they get older, they want to come back and raise their families here, so it's personal. I'm not going to tell you what we need to do. I'm going to tell you what we are going to do, and I'm just going to do it. I spent a lot of time with the Everglades folks, with scientists from FGCU. I've got a strong briefing on all the issues and all the projects. Bottom line is, we need for this issue. If we can bring revenue from the federal government and also push the state government to continue funding what we need, we can get some of these projects done. There's a lot of technology that we can invest into as well, not just the projects. We can talk about all the issues. We're all pretty well versed in them. But bottom line is, I'm a developer, I'm a builder. I know how to get industry involved, and we'll get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you.
My first swim was at Loudermilk Beach. This is a very personal issue for me because the waters of Southwest Florida are not only completely essential for Florida's economy, it's also interstate economy, the rest of the nation, because our waterways are so vast, and for the health and well-being of the people of Southwest Florida. So it is an investment. It is a huge issue, and what happened in 2018 was an atrocity that we allowed this to happen. But we need to go a little bit further, because I actually was talking to an expert on this issue just 4 days ago. And we discussed that in the name of cleaning our waters, there's a lot of extra government spending on research, but not a lot of cleaning, actual physical cleaning. And that's something that I think we need to have an actual fiscal responsibility and a fiscally responsible conservative in Congress, because the spending needs to be focused on actually cleaning the water and ensuring that the money is not going to these organizations that are just trying to profit off of our issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Boy, I'm gonna go lickety-split because a minute's not long on a complex project. What I have been doing since 2016, I led a charge with other political elected officials to sign a 161 city compact to petition Tallahassee and Washington to get to the finish line on what's ultimately going to be a $24 to $25 billion infrastructure project to solve this issue. We're about $13 billion into it. So what I will continue to do, since I have been working in this at the epicenter of it for years, is to take that experience, knowledge to Congress to make sure that we get the billions that are necessary to finish the infrastructure, to finish the C41 and the C43 basins, which will take the pressure off of Caloosahatchee and Port St. Lucie to the east and take 80% of the problems away from us. And it's been said, its threat to our economy is evident, to our quality of life is evident. I'm utterly committed to this project. I know how to do it. I will do it.
Thank you.
Regardless of what business you're in, clean water is the most valuable resource to Southwest Florida. As congressmen, it's important that we continue to get the funding every year because it's appropriated each year on the federal level. There's many projects that have already been started, they're underway, and I think it's important as a congressman to communicate with the Army Corps of Engineers and all the parties that are involved in getting these projects done. In addition, I think it's important not to be bought by special interests, which is another reason why I'm running. I will not take money from special interests that will continue to pollute our water. And that's a big thing, because then all you're doing is you're just sweeping the dust around and you're not getting anything done. With that being said, the reservoir is a great idea. We also need to work on getting funding for looking at the quality of the water within the reservoir, so when it is released, we're not releasing blue-green algae or other overly mineral-rich contaminants into our environment. So those are the things that I would work on. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc.
Okay, we can all agree clean water is very important to our community here in Southwest Florida. That's a given. We all understand that. As all of us as Republicans in here and believe in a capitalist system, that I just don't understand. In the last 30 years, we've had politicians stand in front of this lake and make commercials and talk about, if you elect me, I'm gonna fix this problem. For 30 years straight. We have 65 to 68 projects that are started and funded by the federal government and state government. None of them are really completed, none of them have done anything yet. This is what I don't understand. Why, as Republicans, we automatically start asking the government to fix something for us? That's not what we do. We're capitalists. We need to think outside of the box on this problem and start getting private investors involved. Like I said, the level of the lake is the issue. When it gets too high, we have to release it. A lot of times the algae is still there and it runs into our canals and into our ocean or our Gulf. Okay? I don't have a problem without recruiting companies like the Santi Water or somebody to set up a treatment plant right outside the lake. And when the waters get high, they get the water for free. They can treat it. They can sell the water to us. They can make money. They can pay taxes to Florida.
Time's up.
Okay? But let's think outside the box on this, people.
A lot of this stuff has already been said, so I'm just gonna get straight to the point. A couple of things. The projects have to be completed. It's simple as that. There's not a lot of research that needs to be done because the research has already been done for decades on the Lake Okeechobee flowway system. The one thing that's important to understand is that the flowway system, as it was designed, actually does what it was supposed to do. The issue is that they never intended when they built it that 15 million people would live south of the I-4 corridor. And that's why we're having so many issues we're having today. So we have to do the projects and we have to fund them. But let's be clear on this. There are two men who are responsible for the amount of funding that is happening currently in the Everglades Restoration Plan. The first is Donald Trump. He's the first president that has actually stepped up to fund from the federal level the projects that are necessary. So when I talk to the environmentalists, it's important to let them know they shouldn't be like Donald Trump. The second man is Governor Ron DeSantis. Because when he came into the legislature as governor, when he came back to our state in Florida, he's the one that pushed strongly to make sure that we funded $625 million for Everglades restoration every year he's been governor. So we need to continue that leadership and fund the projects and get the work done.
I live on a canal up at Cape Coral. The water is important and it is an out front issue for me. And as I began to research this project, in fact last night I was reading an article and was talking about some of the shortfalls that we have in cleaning this process up. The Everglades SERP project was signed into law in 2001. And if you take a look at that from 2001 to 2015, the maximum daily load that is coming into Okeechobee has not gone down. In fact, it's gone up. We have some major problems because of the agricultural that's in the Kissimmee River Basin there is not being mitigated. And the problem we had this last legislative session is they did not do the due diligence to ensure that those agricultural farmers that are working along the river there are maintaining the phosphorus load in their land and it's not going into the river. So we have a major problem. With the state delegation, as your congressman, I commit that I will work to bring those monies that we need from Washington to mitigate this, but also to work with the state legislature to help be a part of a cohesive solution to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, I'm gonna do a lightning round, 30 seconds. And I'm gonna ask Dan for you to go first. And give us your thoughts. A lot of things are happening in the country right now that are confusing and anxiety producing. I'm sure everybody here has been looking at TV and is concerned and uncertain. Tell us what you think about the movement to defund the police.
It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. We have to have the police, and they know we have to have the police. Okay, I was standing in the line just a few nights ago near protesters, and one of the protesters got hit with a truck. It wasn't bad, it was just, a little bump. And the first thing the protester screamed, "Call 911." And we're all standing around, we're like, "We're here, what do you mean? Now you want the police? Or you don't want the police?" We gotta get it straight, okay? They know, only 7% of the country really supports these people and what they're doing. The rest of the country still supports the law enforcement and supports us doing the right thing. The problem is they're just silent.
they just have the voice right now. That loud minority is controlling everything through our media, and our Democrats in Washington, D.C. is pushing the issue. It must end.
Dave, you're number,
I was 3.
3. We're gonna do number 4 next.
That'd be me.
Mayor.
Oh, 30 seconds. I could write a book on this. I have led the charge starting 6 years ago to reform our Fort Myers PD. I love our PD. Our men and women are one of the top agencies in the world. Defunding the police department. Forrest Gump said it, stupid is as stupid does. And that's what it's talking about when you say defund the police department. You want to call your police department. You can do that in Fort Myers with great comfort. They're great leaders. We're not a sanctuary city because of it. We will not tolerate anarchy. And in a show that brought me to tears, our police chief in Carmine Messino, our sheriff's department, knelt in solidarity with our peaceful protesters for George Floyd. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think everybody in this room agrees that it's absolute craziness. The question is, what do we do about it? Our government it owes it to the citizens to ensure domestic tranquility, and the opportunities afforded to all Americans are independent of identity, and we all know that as well. So the local police departments need to step up, and if they don't step up, then the surrounding police departments and the governors need to step up, and then if they need to call in the National Guard, they need to do that. We cannot back down to this craziness. And the other thing is it's a minority, but they're loud. The majority of us are not crazy. So that's what I think.
Thank you. Christy?
So defunding the police is ridiculous, especially when I hear a leftist saying that they want to reapportion the money to therapists instead. So next time someone calls 911 saying there's someone breaking into my house, they can say, well, did you call a therapist? Now, what the real issue is we need to protect our blue lives. I've done a ride-along. I've spent 5 hours on the job with a police officer, and they are protecting our lives every day, saving people from domestic violence calls, theft, even a fire that night. We have to protect our police officers because they're the ones risking their lives. There was a bad apple that killed George Floyd, but the reality is we need to actually protect our police officers. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is insanity. It's the leftist elitists that are encouraging, promoting the mob. These are people that are misguided and misled. Bottom line is what we need to let our police officers know on the streets, that we have their back. If their leaders have their back, because they're in the position where they're out to get them in the street, and then their officials behind them are throwing them under the bus, and that's a very dangerous place to be. We should all support our police, all of our law enforcement. We're a nation of rules and law and order. Thank you.
My mother-in-law is a retired chief of police. My father-in-law is a retired sheriff's deputy. I stand with our men and women in law enforcement. In fact, not to fund them, we need to fund them better. We need to fund them more so that we can attract the best and the brightest to make sure that they are protecting us. Now, we've seen what's happening across our country. We've got Chaz in Seattle now, a autonomous zone. Is that such a bad thing to give Seattle and say that it's no longer part of the United States? Let's give them San Diego, New York, Detroit as well. We'll see how the electoral colleges fall. Let them have anarchy for a little while. They will be calling for the police to come in and save them in not too long, and have faith in our president making sure that happens. Thank
you. I agree with Daniel. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I was actually did an interview with the Daily Caller about this specific situation. And the reason why this is important is somebody who's grown up in an urban community. You defund the police, what you're actually inviting is more criminality to affect the poorest people in our societies. Most of them Black, a lot of them Hispanic, and some of them white that live in our urban corridors every single day. But if you look at the details of these plans and the people who promote defunding the police, what they want to do is take that money to put more money into their already failed liberal agenda and their already failed government programs, which have failed our inner cities for more than 70 years in America. It's not enough just to oppose the funding of police. We have to stand against this radical agenda that has already been proven to fail across America for more than 7 decades.
I guess we just need to call it for what it is. It's ludicrous. And I think in terms of, us as conservatives and people within the confines of a structured system, we need to be outspoken in support of our police. And there was a chief of police from New York the other day that spoke very eloquently in terms of these people are in there because they love their country, they love the communities that they serve. They are the most effective ambassadors that we have on the street, and we need to be pushing back on these that are pushing for anarchy.
Okay, everybody's had a chance on that one. I guess I should preface the question with,
If you're elected, what will you do? With respect to the following groups, Antifa and Black Lives Matter, where do you stand with respect to there are two kinds of actions that have been taken: lawful, peaceful actions under the First Amendment right of assembly, and unlawful, violent actions that are criminal. And what are you going to do? And we're going to start with number one, the ACE. What are you going to do if you're a congressman with respect to those two groups?
Well, I think the first step President Trump has taken in terms of declaring that Antifa is a terrorist organization.
excuse me, Dan, I'm gonna give you a minute on this one. You can start now.
Okay. And in that context, now we're able to see who is actually funding this organization that is undermining our constitutional rights. And I think as we begin to reveal all of the things that are involved in this, reading an article yesterday, it was talking about Black Lives Matter and how they are linked to the DNC. And so all of those people that are funding Black Lives Matter are running in monies through Black Lives Matter into the DNC coffer, which filters out those foreigners. It does not filter out those foreign investments. So we have people like George Soros from overseas in Germany who's pushing money into Black Lives Matter, and who are in turn pushing it into the Democratic congressional process. So there are some things that need to be done, and as your congressman, I would aggressively go after that process. When I was in Minnesota, I saw voter fraud in Minnesota, and ran twice for Secretary of State. First time lost by 3, last time by 1 point. I'm passionate about good government. I'm passionate about protecting our Constitution. As your congressman, I will do exactly that.
Thank you.
All right, this is actually a really important question, because there's 10 of us running in this race. A lot of you are wondering, well, who should we vote for, who should we support? And this is important now. Members of Congress have a job to do, and that is to uphold the Constitution. It is actually to execute their powers under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It is actually to pass budgets for our nation. That's their job. But there's also another platform that members of Congress have, and that's actually to begin to have this quote-unquote conversation on race that the left always wants to have, but always seems to neglect. If you want to really get at the heart of what's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, the organization, and then also Antifa, you got to have members of Congress, frankly, who can actually go and have these debates and have these hard discussions where you talk about inequalities that do exist in urban communities, but the fact that our nation is still the freest nation of the world with more opportunities than any other nation. And so this is a point of distinction. How are you going to actually have this conversation with Don Lemon or Mika Brzezinski or Morning Joe? How are you actually going to get involved into our communities and bring to light the beauty of America based upon conservative principles? That's how you actually deal with this as a member of Congress. It's not all in the halls. It's also with the platform you are given as an elected member.
Time, thank you.
I'll start in the order how it happened. Black Lives Matter gave birth to Ferguson, Missouri, when the officer Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson. Our president at the time, President Obama, went down there and appeased the people and listened to the witnesses that didn't even witness the crime, telling everybody that Mr. Brown had his hands up when he was shot. And that's where the hands up, don't shoot comes from the Black Lives Matter organization. And that was found to be false, because the true people in that community came forward and told the truth, the true witnesses, and they were African American also. But it wasn't his friend that was standing there that lied to the police and said he had his hands up. And our president at the time supported the lie, and that's where that came from. The birth of that organization came from that lie, and they've been carrying it on ever since. Antifa This has been going on for years, and it's basically similar to what Hitler did with his brown shirts, taking the youth of his country and converting them into some perverse unit to tout his lines out there through our universities and education. What I want to do is I want to put God back in the schools. I want to teach history to our children so they know really the true message out there. And God bless everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to do exactly what I have been doing as the only 3-term mayor in the history of our 140-year city, and that is make certain that our law enforcement is hitting head-on the anarchy attempts, the politicizing, the hijacking of the process through politicizing through things like Black Lives Matter, which is a political movement, not a practical movement, and arrest those who break the law and threaten the safety of our citizens. I have been getting up every day of my life in my public service as an elected official to protect the First Amendment, your freedom, your right to speak, your right to peaceful protest, and your right to have competent law enforcement protect you in the event of peaceful protest. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Black Lives Matter and Antifa are under the guise of grassroots organizations that are hijacking the Constitution to quote-unquote peacefully protest, but we all know that these are very carefully orchestrated groups that are well funded. And it's going to take investigation and then finding out who's funding these organizations, arresting them, and convicting them. And that's a good way to start breaking down these groups. With that being said, as a congressman, I think that we can look at things like education and the Department of Education and help encourage getting education back to the states, defund the Department of Education, getting education choice and promoting the nuclear family unit will help to teach civics and get these kids less likely to join these crazy groups that are completely misinforming them and indoctrinating them. So that's what we can do. And I would say, in addition to that, as a conservative in a conservative district, we can get the word out about encouraging people to stand up for our Constitution, for conservative values, family values, and that will help to spread the word. Thank you.
I have personally faced Antifa. When I was in Washington, D.C., they charged Trump Hotel when I was there. And I can tell you, this is not about race. This is an opportunist agenda to destroy America. They were just waiting for the moment, and they took advantage of that moment. Now, I heard the words, let them have their anarchy. And it's the opposite. That's the exact complacency that leftist radical Democrats are actually banking on and hoping that we Republicans will allow the anarchy to destroy our American cities. It is our job in Congress to protect the rights of the individual. And they are being oppressed in Seattle right now in the autonomous zone. Their constitutional liberties are being oppressed and destroyed. And it is our job to be hard and take action. We cannot be complacent. We cannot let them have their anarchy. And in Congress, we have to protect their personal liberties by being strong with these radical leftists who are terrorizing our nation.
Thank you.
Antifa is a terrorist group. We need to shut them down. George Soros is a traitor, and all these leftists. And we're all sitting here watching this with disgust and watching us lose our country, being misguided, going to a different direction with all these liberal ideas. And this is a war of ideology. We need fighters, we need disruptors. We finally have a voice in the White House, President Trump, who's fighting this and combating this. He is a fighter, he's a disruptor. He's changing the culture day by day. He needs fighters along his side in Congress to get our country back. Thank you.
Make no mistake about it, I support and protect all of our constitutional amendments, and especially our first, our second, our third, our fourth, or fifth, every single one of them. And there are people who are out there who are trying to peacefully protest, and their well intentions have been hijacked by socialists, by George Soros, through Black Lives Matter, through Antifa, a terrorist organization, and they do need to be investigated and defunded. We don't need to defund the police, we need to defend these terrorist organizations. And here's what I mean by allowing the autonomous zone, we do need to step up and fight. And President Trump has done exactly what we need to do. He's calling on these blue states, these governors, to send out their National Guard. Governor DeSantis has done that to DC to enforce this. But what we need to do is separate these people that think that they are supporting their beliefs that are actually being hijacked by these movements, by George Soros and these socialists. And we do that by making sure that they understand that police and law and order matter. We need to stand for law and order, and when they see anarchy being abused, they will come back to the right side and they will fight with us against anarchy, against Black Lives Matter, and against Antifa. We need to make a stand.
Thank you, Dave.
We only have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask each candidate to give us 30 seconds on the carbon tax that was supported by Congressman Rooney and which proved to be very unpopular in this region. Where do you stand on that if you're elected?
Going to start with number 1.
That was the thing that caught my attention that initially made me step up to the plate to run for Congress. Because carbon tax is a Ponzi scheme that's set upon us by a world council that's trying to bring us to a one world government. Carbon tax was that initial issue. I oppose it significantly with all I've got. Thanks.
Actually, I agree with everything that Dan just said. This is ridiculous. I'm not sure why Congressman Rooney even came out and supported the idea. A carbon tax will only lead to actually more dislocation in our energy markets. And who is it going to affect? Are frankly, middle-income Americans and low-income Americans. And also, a carbon tax is another tax that our nation doesn't need. We have more taxes, frankly, than we ever need in this country. We're raising more money in the federal government right now than in the history of our nation. And yet, people still talk about raising new taxes. It should not happen. We have to oppose it at every step.
Thank you.
Yeah, the carbon tax was uncalled for, and I would do everything I can to make sure that would never happen if I was there in Mr. Rooney's shoes that time. Our deficit's around $25 trillion right now. Last thing we need is more taxes on the burden of the middle class people, and definitely not on our energy. Thank you.
No on the carbon tax, of course, no on taxes in general. The only way that we're going to grow our economy out of this threat of 7 or 8 trillion is unleashing our economy, removing impediments such as the carbon tax and other taxes that threaten small business in America and threaten families to provide for their families. No.
Thank you.
I'm completely opposed to the carbon tax. I'm completely opposed to any additional taxes. We're a nation that's overtaxed as it is, and such a tax would in fact penalize the middle and lower income people more than anybody else. We need to cut taxes. We need Trump tax cuts 2.0. We need to help businesses reduce their business taxes and capital gains. So that's my position on it.
This is something that I love about our president because he tells it how it is. I'm against the carbon tax, but notice how whenever there's a new tax, how impossible it is to remove that tax. It's almost an impossibility. And that's something that President Trump has talked on quite a bit. So yes, I'm very angry with Francis Rooney for many, many things, that being one of them. But we need a congressperson who's actually going to stick to their word. Because when you say no to taxes, no to increasing taxes, it's to saying no to having 30, 50 years of that tax being implemented and being a detriment to the American family.
Thank you, Christy.
Yes, absolutely against carbon tax. I'm an energy guy. I understand this. I live this. I deal with it. Carbon taxes and taxes, all they do is eat away from our top line revenue. We all know that. It's a terrible mistake. I'm not sure why Francis Rooney did that. I oppose that 100%. It's something that I'll definitely fight against, and always fight for growth and low taxes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely not. No new taxes. As chair of the Energy and Utilities Subcommittee in the Florida House, I fought against and defunded taxpayer-subsidized incentives for clean energy. I fought against the Clean Energy Act before President Trump finally came in and saved the states from that atrocity. The only way forward is the free market. We need to get government out of the way, allow free market innovation and competition to move forward, and that's the only path forward. No new taxes.
Thank you. All right.
It's exactly 9 o'clock. Our promise is to get you out of here by 9 o'clock, and so we're concluding this part of the program. I'd like the candidates to all rise. Take a good look at them. You've had a chance to meet them today and to see them. You have some very tough choices here, folks. How about a big hand for all these candidates?